Billionaire followed Black Waitress after her shift. What he saw made him break down in tears. What if a single moment of kindness could change everything you thought you knew about someone? On a cold Tuesday evening in downtown Chicago, 42-year-old tech billionaire Nathan Brooks sat alone in his usual corner booth at Murphy's Diner, watching the world through rain-streaked windows. He'd been coming here for 3 months now, always ordering the same black coffee and apple pie, always served by the same waitress who moved with quiet grace despite the exhaustion that never seemed to leave her eyes. 36-year-old Camila Rodriguez had no idea that the quiet man in the expensive suit was worth more than most small countries. To her, he was just another customer who left decent tips and never caused trouble. But tonight would be different. Tonight, Nathan would follow her home after her shift ended, driven by a curiosity he couldn't quite explain. What he discovered would shatter every assumption he'd ever made about struggle, sacrifice, and the true meaning of wealth. Where are you watching from tonight? Nathan had built his empire from nothing, turning a simple app idea into a technology revolution that connected millions of people worldwide. Success had come with a price, though. Loneliness that money couldn't cure, and relationships that felt shallow and transactional. His penthouse apartment overlooking Lake Michigan felt more like a museum than a home, filled with expensive art, but empty of laughter or love. 3 months ago, after another failed business dinner, where potential partners only saw dollar signs when they looked at him, Nathan had stumbled into Murphy's Diner, seeking nothing more than decent coffee and anonymity. The worn vinyl booths and flickering neon sign were a stark contrast to the 5-star restaurants he usually frequented, but something about the place felt real, in a way his world rarely did anymore. Camila had been working the evening shift that first night, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, moving efficiently between tables despite the obvious fatigue in her shoulders. She'd served him coffee and pie with a genuine smile that didn't seem calculated or practiced like the ones he encountered in boardrooms. There was something about her quiet dignity that intrigued him. The way she treated every customer with the same respectful attention, whether they ordered a full meal or just nursed a single cup of coffee for hours. Over the weeks that followed, Nathan found himself returning to Murphy's more frequently than he could rationally justify. He learned Camila worked double shifts most days, arriving at noon and staying until the diner closed at midnight. She never complained, never seemed anything but professional and kind, even when dealing with difficult customers who treated her poorly. He noticed she often skipped her breaks, instead using those precious minutes to help her co-worker Maria, whose English wasn't as strong, communicate with customers. Nathan began to wonder about her life outside these fluorescent-lit walls. Did she have family? Dreams she'd put on hold? The expensive watch on his wrist felt heavier each night as he watched her count tips with careful precision, her face lighting up when the amount was better than expected. He'd started leaving larger tips, always in cash, always when she wasn't looking. The last thing he wanted was to make her feel uncomfortable or indebted. Tonight felt different, though. Camila seemed more tired than usual, and he'd noticed her wiping her eyes quickly when she thought no one was looking. When a businessman at table 6 had snapped at her for bringing the wrong order, an order he'd clearly changed twice. Nathan had seen something break a little behind her professional smile. She'd apologized gracefully and fixed the problem, but her hands had trembled slightly as she cleared the table. As closing time approached, and the last customers filtered out into the Chicago night, Nathan made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of walking to his Tesla parked around the corner, he waited in the shadows across the street, telling himself he just wanted to make sure she got home safely. The neighborhood wasn't the best, and a woman walking alone at midnight deserved to have someone watching out for her, even if she didn't know it. When Camilla finally emerged from the diner's back entrance, her shoulders sagging with exhaustion, Nathan quietly followed at a distance, his heart beginning to race with an anticipation he couldn't quite name. Nathan maintained his distance as Camilla walked through the increasingly rough neighborhood, her pace quick but careful. She kept her head down and stayed close to the streetlights, clearly familiar with the route despite the late hour. After 15 minutes, she stopped at a rundown apartment building where half the windows were boarded up and graffiti covered most of the brick exterior. But instead of going inside, Camilla sat down on the front steps and pulled out her phone. Even from across the street, Nathan could see the blue glow illuminating tears on her cheeks. She was crying, really crying, in a way that spoke of exhaustion that went far deeper than physical tiredness. She held the phone to her ear, and though he couldn't hear her words, her body language suggested she was pleading with someone, her free hand gesturing helplessly. The call ended abruptly, and Camilla buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Nathan felt something twist painfully in his chest. This woman who served others with such grace and dignity was clearly carrying a burden that was breaking her apart, piece by piece. He wanted to cross the street, to ask what was wrong, to help somehow, but he knew his presence would only frighten her. A strange man following her home in the middle of the night wasn't exactly the kind of help she needed. After a few minutes, Camilla wiped her face and stood up, but instead of entering the building, she walked around to the side where a rusty fire escape zigzagged up the brick wall. Nathan watched in growing concern as she climbed to the second floor and carefully opened a window. She was breaking into the building where she lived, which meant she didn't have keys, which meant she probably couldn't afford the rent. As she disappeared through the window, Nathan noticed movement in other windows throughout the building. Faces appeared briefly. An elderly man, a young mother holding a baby, teenagers peering out curiously. These people knew Camilla, and their expressions weren't suspicious or annoyed. They looked worried, caring, like family watching out for one of their own. 20 minutes later, Camilla emerged from the front entrance carrying a small duffel bag and what looked like textbooks. She locked the door carefully behind her, then sat back down on the steps and pulled out a flashlight. Under its thin beam, she opened one of the textbooks and began to study, using her phone as a timer and taking notes on a pad balanced on her knee. Nathan realized with a jolt that she was studying for something important, probably classes she was taking during whatever few hours she wasn't working. Here was a woman working double shifts at a diner, apparently struggling to pay rent and still finding time to educate herself in the early hours of morning. The dedication and determination it must take to maintain such a schedule, to pursue dreams while barely surviving, left him breathless. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. As dawn began to lighten the sky and Camilla finally packed up her books, Nathan made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He was going to find out her story, and then he was going to do everything in his power to help. Nathan spent the next week conducting the kind of research his business success had taught him to do thoroughly. What he discovered left him stunned and humbled in ways he'd never experienced before. Camila Rodriguez wasn't just working double shifts at Murphy's Diner, she was supporting her elderly grandmother who'd raised her, putting herself through nursing school, and somehow managing to help several other families in her building pay their rent when they came up short. Through discreet inquiries and public records, Nathan learned that Camila's grandmother, Eleanor, had suffered a stroke 6 months earlier. The medical bills had wiped out their savings, and Elena's Social Security barely covered her medications. Camila had dropped from full-time to part-time student status so she could work more hours, extending her path to becoming a nurse by 2 years. She'd also taken on small jobs, cleaning offices before her diner shifts, doing laundry for neighbors, tutoring kids in the building, anything to keep their heads above water. The apartment building where she lived was scheduled for demolition in 3 months. The landlord had given everyone notice to move, but most of the tenants, including Camila and her grandmother, had nowhere to go. That phone call Nathan had witnessed wasn't about personal problems. Camila had been pleading with a rental agency about a deposit for a new place, a deposit she couldn't afford because every penny went to keeping her grandmother alive and comfortable. What truly broke Nathan's heart was learning about Camila's impact on others, despite her own struggles. Mrs. Chen, on the 3rd floor, had cancer and no family nearby. Camila brought her groceries every week and sat with her during chemotherapy appointments. The young mother Nathan had seen in the window was a teenager named Jessica, who'd been kicked out by her parents. Camila had helped her apply for government assistance and watched Jessica's baby when she went to job interviews. There were a dozen similar stories throughout the building, people whose lives Camila had touched with small acts of enormous kindness, even when she had almost nothing to give. Nathan found himself lying awake at night, thinking about the contrast between their worlds. He owned 4 homes he rarely visited, cars he barely drove, and had more money sitting in investment accounts than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. Meanwhile, Camila was choosing between textbooks and groceries, studying by flashlight because she couldn't afford to keep the electricity on late at night, and still finding ways to help others who had even less. The revelation that hit him hardest came from talking to Maria, Camila's co-worker at the diner. Camila had been offered a full-time position at a higher-end restaurant with better tips, but she'd turned it down because she couldn't leave Murphy's short-staffed and knew they couldn't afford to hire someone else right away. She'd literally chosen loyalty and kindness over her own financial welfare. On Friday evening, Nathan sat in his usual booth watching Camila work, his heart heavy with the weight of what he now knew. When she brought his coffee, her smile was as genuine as always, but he could see the stress lines around her eyes had deepened. Her grandmother's condition was worsening, the building demolition deadline was approaching, and nursing school was becoming increasingly difficult to manage. Have you ever felt like you wanted to help someone but didn't know how to do it without offending them? Let us know in the comments. Nathan knew he had to act, but he also knew that approaching this wrong could damage the very dignity that made Camila so remarkable. Nathan's plan took shape over the weekend with the same strategic thinking that had built his empire, but this time, the stakes felt infinitely more personal. He couldn't just throw money at Camila's problems. That would be insulting and might drive her away. Instead, he needed to create opportunities that would allow her to earn her way to a better life while maintaining the pride and independence that defined her character. Monday morning, Nathan walked into the office of Dr. Patricia Williams, the Dean of Nursing at the University of Chicago. As a major donor to the university, Nathan had access that others didn't, and he used it now for the first time for purely personal reasons. "I want to fund a full scholarship program," he told Dr. Williams, "for working students in your nursing program who demonstrate exceptional character and commitment to community service." Dr. Williams was intrigued but cautious. "Let's start with one," Nathan said carefully. "I have a specific student in mind, someone who's been brought to my attention through community service work." That evening, Nathan took the step that terrified him most. He walked into Murphy's diner at closing time and approached Camilla directly. His heart was pounding as she looked up from wiping down tables, surprised to see him so late. "Hi," he said, his usual confidence deserting him completely. "I'm Nathan." Camilla's expression was polite but cautious. "Of course." "Your service is perfect," Nathan said quickly. "It's actually about something else entirely. I work in technology, and my company partners with the University of Chicago on various programs." Camilla's eyes widened slightly. "How did you—" "I also heard that you've been nominated for a new scholarship program we're funding," Nathan continued, his words tumbling out faster than he'd planned. "For students who show exceptional dedication to their studies and their communities." The coffee pot in Camilla's hand trembled slightly. "I don't understand." "You don't have to apply," Nathan said gently. "You were nominated by someone who's been watching your work ethic and community involvement. The scholarship covers everything: full tuition, books, living expenses." Camilla sat down heavily in the nearest booth, her professional composure finally cracking. "This isn't real," she whispered. Nathan sat across from her, fighting every instinct that wanted to tell her exactly who he was and how much he could do for her. "They happen to people who deserve them," he said instead. "People who work 3 jobs and still find time to help their neighbors." Tears were flowing freely down Camilla's face now. "My grandmother," she managed to say. "She's sick, and the building we live in—" "The scholarship includes provisions for family medical expenses and emergency housing," Nathan said softly. "If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales." For the first time in months, Nathan saw something he'd almost forgotten existed in Camilla's eyes: hope. 6 months later, Nathan sat in a different booth at Murphy's diner, watching Camilla work her last shift before transitioning to full-time studies and her new internship at Chicago General Hospital. The transformation in her was remarkable. The exhaustion had left her eyes, replaced by a confidence and joy that illuminated everything around her. She moved with the same grace and kindness she'd always shown, but now there was lightness in her step that spoke of dreams finally within reach. Elena Rodriguez had moved into a beautiful assisted living facility where she received the medical care she needed while maintaining her independence. Camilla visited her grandmother every day after classes, and their weekly family dinners had become the highlight of both their weeks. The scholarship program had grown too. Nathan had quietly expanded it to include 5 more students, each one chosen for their character as much as their academic potential. What Camilla never learned was that the technology company funding her scholarship was Nathan's own, or that the selection committee was just Nathan himself, making sure deserving students got the opportunities they'd earned. She believed she'd been chosen randomly, through a combination of hard work and good fortune, and Nathan preferred it that way. Her success felt genuine because the scholarship had simply removed the barriers that poverty had placed in her path. The apartment building had been saved too, though Camilla didn't know Nathan had quietly purchased it through a shell company and converted it into affordable housing with proper maintenance and utilities. Mrs. Chen still lived on the 3rd floor, now cancer-free and helping other tenants navigate medical paperwork. Tonight, as Nathan prepared to order his usual coffee and pie for what would be the last time in this particular way, Camilla approached his table with a smile that could have powered the entire city. "Nathan," she said warmly, "I wanted to thank you again for connecting me with that scholarship program." "You earned every bit of it," Nathan replied truthfully. Camila's eyes grew serious for a moment. "You know, I've always believed that people come into our lives exactly when we need them. I was losing hope when you mentioned that scholarship." She paused, her voice thick with emotion. Nathan felt his throat tighten. "You saved mine too," he said, quietly, meaning it more than she could ever know. As Camila walked away to help another customer, Nathan realized that the emptiness he'd carried for so long had filled with something infinitely more valuable than money. The knowledge that kindness ripples outward in ways we never expect, touching lives in patterns too beautiful and complex to plan or predict. Sometimes the greatest wealth comes not from what we accumulate, but from what we have the privilege to give away. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Thank you for joining us tonight, and remember, there's always room for more kindness in this world.